Welcome to Leading Your Culture, brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Bill Nye. While serving the United States Air Force, I was selected to attend the U.S. Air Force Leadership School, which is still the foundation for many of my leadership beliefs. That experience set me on a course for a successful career in business, consulting, mentoring, training, and speaking. In this series, my guests will come from many disciplines to discuss the most serious and at times not so serious topics on leadership and culture. Welcome to another episode of Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. Of course, I'm your host, Bill Nye, and I'm really excited about today because we have a really special guest. I've been looking forward to this conversation for the last couple of weeks since we first connected and got this on the schedule. And I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. So joining me today is the CEO of Entryway, David Williams. And David has 42 years of experience in the nonprofit world. And Entryway is doing some amazing work. And of course, you know, we start thinking a little bit more about this sort of thing as we get into the holidays. We're spending money on gifts, and we start thinking about those who are less fortunate. And Entryway does an amazing job with helping people who are really have had a tough lot in life, if you will. And so I think the best place to start, David, if you don't mind, is for those who don't know who Entryway is and what you do, tell us about your mission. What is it that you guys do?
Great. Thank you, Bill. And thank you for the opportunity to be on the show. 60% of all Americans live on less or have less than $1,000 in savings, which means it doesn't take much for life to go sideways. And we work with a population that we call situationally homeless. And what that means is, when people think about homeless people, they typically think about the guy that's on the street corner that might be dealing with issues around mental illness or addiction. But the reality is that there are a lot of folks that, because they've lost a job, they've had a health crisis, maybe a domestic situation, they find themselves maybe couch surfing with friends or family, or living in a shelter or living a vehicle, but they want to work, they have good skills, they just need a second chance. And that's the group that we work with. And we work with the multifamily sector because that's a business that that needs entry-level individuals for a lot of jobs like leasing, groundskeeping, maintenance is, of course, the big one. And most apartment communities have some vacant apartments on site that they're willing to use for people who work on that site. And so we have nearly 100 property management companies that we work with that interview and potentially hire our candidates. There's certainly no obligation. They have to win the interview, and we train them in a number of certifications that are pertinent to multifamily. And if it works out, an individual is able to get a job and a place to live on site at a discounted rate. They're still paying rent, but there is a discount, which is something the industry has done for a long time. And if we do our job well, we're providing talent to property management companies at no cost to them. And again, labor is one of the top 5 issues every year that property management companies are dealing with, being able to recruit and retain good talent. And so if we do our job well, then we're helping the industry. And of course, we're helping people really from a preventative standpoint, not become chronically homeless. And so I think it's a win-win.
So you're working with people who have found themselves in a situation where they've lost their home and they're unemployed, correct? And so then
some are unemployed, some are actually employed, but they might be underemployed. So they might be working part-time. They're not able to sustain themselves, basically, though.
Okay, so their income isn't sufficient enough to put a roof over their head. I'm curious because, as you know from our previous conversation, I've been a client of yours. I ran a management company years ago, and we partnered with you guys, and it was a great experience for us. It was a great experience for our team. But I'm curious, how does someone come across your desk? Like, how do you identify people who are the right folks to help with your program?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so we partner with social service programs and community colleges and technical schools um, to essentially they're the first identification of these individuals. So you talk to any instructor at a technical school and they'll tell you, oh yeah, I got two guys, they're living out of their cars, but they're trying to get certified in HVAC or
Yeah.
construction or plumbing or electrical. Or we'll work with social service organizations that have a workforce development program, a Salvation Army, a Goodwill, programs like that that are specifically trying to get people, um, honestly, out of their program and into the workforce. And so we partner with those organizations. If we're doing our job right, we're complementing what they're doing. And so they may be housing them, feeding them, training them, but ultimately it's all about self-sustainability. They want to get them into job and a stable housing environment. And that's where we can come in and partner with them.
So these aren't people that are struggling because of addiction, mental illness, as you said. These are, as you said, situationally homeless, and so really they just need a hand up. And once they get a steady paycheck and a roof over their head, I'm assuming you see a pretty good success rate of these folks then just sort of blending in with the rest of society.
We do. Just one clarification: we will work with some addiction programs,
Okay.
but they have to be a year, at least a year, uh, sober before we would ever consider somebody. But some of our greatest success stories have been individuals who, fell into addiction, but they were able to, get themselves out of it and be able to um, become a productive employee. And um, so yes, we do. We do have some amazing success stories, which is it's always great to tell those. I think the other thing though is that we are in the people business, and people still, still make mistakes, and
Mhm.
so we don't bat 1,000.
Yeah,
And
of course.
but I think most of our property management companies realize that these are positions, especially these entry level jobs. There's 50% turnover in these things. Either that the
Yeah, right.
employer is, uh, you know, initiating, or the other piece to this is that if somebody's offering 25 cents an hour or more across the street. A lot of times folks are going after that. And so we do see better retention with our individuals. And of course, that's got to be the value proposition. We want to help the industry be able to recruit and retain individuals. And some of the great success stories are that, a number of these individuals are getting promoted. We have a couple people who are now community managers, assistant property managers. We have our first property manager, and I can't wait for the day that, you'll be interviewing somebody on this show who's a senior executive. And when you ask them how they got into the multifamily sector, their answer will be Entryway.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a great story for sure. How common is it for these folks to be a family? There's young children involved.
Yeah, very common.
Wow.
And so we certainly do have single individuals,
Yeah.
but dependents are part of the deal. Especially if you look at most of the women that come through our program, sometimes are coming through a domestic uh, situation,
Yeah.
and so they're you know single mom with a couple kids, and that's where being able to live on site, and it's not a requirement. We do have situations where we'll figure out the housing in another way, but the program is really about being able to live and work on site. And if you think about a single parent with a couple kids, being able to do that is a huge blessing. And so it's something that I think again is unique to multifamily, that they're able to provide both employment and housing at the same time. And of course, that's a benefit to the company as well. When you have people that are on site, if there are issues that come up, they you're not waiting for 45 or 50 an hour for somebody to get there to be able to fix the problem, because they're right there.
Yeah, I don't know how many people are aware of the number of mothers who either their child or children are in harm's way because of an abusive husband, father, or they're abusive to them, and they see one option, and that is when he's gone, we've got to pack what we can fit quickly, get into a car, and disappear. And of course, then they don't always have a plan beyond just survival,
Right.
and find themselves maybe in a shelter temporarily, things of that nature. And so, it certainly breaks my heart. I'm just going to be very honest and vulnerable with you. I relocated to North Carolina, over 30 years ago, took a job as a maintenance supervisor as an apartment community, with the promise that it would come with an apartment. And then once I started, I was told I had to be there for 3 months before I could move on site. And I was living in my car. I would park my car in front of the maintenance shop, and that was my home. And fortunately for me, word got to the owners that this new maintenance supervisor was sleeping in his car because of a company policy. And the owner said, "Well, that's ridiculous. We've heard great things about this new guy. Let's go ahead and give him keys to an apartment and let him move in now." So,
Wow.
I was very fortunate, but, it took another person to say, "We have an answer to your problem, and here's the answer." And that's really what you guys are. I'm curious too, because, I'm a veteran, and as you know, I own a veteran nonprofit. Um, and I'm curious, how often do your folks you're working with, how often are they veterans? Is that a common occurrence as well?
Yeah, it's not as I would like our percentage to be greater in terms of the number of veterans that we work with. Right now, 5% of the
Okay.
people that we've placed are veterans. But I think it's veterans typically come with, a strong work ethic. They look, if you've worked on a fighter jet, you can probably fix a toilet or a sink. And
Guarantee
so
you can.
yeah. And so again, some of our greatest success stories are individuals who served our country and now are doing a great job for their employer.
Yeah, it's I wonder sometimes, because America is a nation of abundance, and I write and talk both in my podcasts and in my keynote presentations about culture all the time. And I always say, David, that a great culture is a culture of abundance. It produces more than enough, right? And so great companies. They when they have a great culture, there's an abundance of opportunities, there's an abundance of job security. There's an abundance of, so many really good things, empowerment and trust and longevity. And America is certainly a country of abundance, right? I mean, we produce so much food, and we throw away in this country more food than half the world produces. And it just goes in the garbage can here. And so, I wonder sometimes, what does this say about our culture that we have? Because you can go to any city in America, and I live just south of Houston, and I believe you're in Phoenix, if I remember correctly. And
Right.
you can go to any city in America, and there's homelessness everywhere. And of course, some of it is a mental health issue, an addiction issue. But what does that say about our culture as a nation, that we have all this abundance, and yet we have such a big homeless problem?
Yeah, and this really goes back to I think it was the early '80s when I think going back to the late '70s, a movie came out that some of your viewers might remember. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest
Sure.
that kind of
Great movie.
showed. Yeah, great movie, but it showed the state of kind of mental hospitals, and somehow we came to the conclusion that it would be more humane to just let people with mental illness kind of just do whatever and live
Right.
wherever, and I think this has been a little bit of the kind of the impact of that, where um, and I don't think it has served our country well. I think people that are suffering from mental illness need to be cared for and not just allowed to, you know, live under a bridge or just, whatever. And I think that's I think that's unfortunate. Your comment about abundance and just being in Houston. Where I originally got into the nonprofit sector was being part of a small group that started the Houston Food Bank. And so your comment about, the abundance of our country is absolutely spot on. We are really fortunate that, unless a food item is perfect, we're not interested in it, and it might be perfectly edible, but if that can has a little dent in it, if the box says is crushed, or if a fruit or vegetable has a little imperfection, then we're not going to buy it. And yet, um, and so, you know, it is the challenge of being in a country that has, uh, you know, provided abundance to millions of our citizens, and yet we have individuals that are struggling. And I think that's one of the reasons why Entryway is attractive, in that, we've spent billions as a country on the issue of homelessness, and it just doesn't feel like we're making progress. Um, but it's gone up in terms of the number of people. But this is a situation where if we do our job well, again, there's a longer term impact, and I think there's also a generational impact, because I think if you're looking at kids, you mentioned kids earlier. Uh, Kids are not going to be able to thrive in school or anywhere else from a health standpoint if they're living in a car, if they're living in a shelter. And so to be able to live in a stable home, with a parent, in a stable job, then that just increases the opportunity for the next generation to thrive, and do well. And so I think that's one of the attractions of Entryway, is that it's a longer term path for individuals that today are struggling.
So you mentioned that you work with almost 100 management companies. So I assume you're, if not in every state, you're in the majority of the states in this country. Um,
And actually, we're not. We're in about 11, and
oh,
so
okay.
yeah. So our even though those property management companies, of course, are everywhere. But we started this idea of decentralizing the organization in 2021, and so we picked 5 cities, and we've just been adding cities every year since then.
Okay.
In each of those cities, we have what we call a city advisory board, and they're made up of multifamily executives. And the interesting thing is that whenever a board member joins, or whenever not, multifamily executive joins our board, I always ask how they got into multifamily. And it's always interesting that, I would say at least half the time they'll say, well, I went to school. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I saw an ad for a leasing
Sure.
agent, or some type of entry level job. And then I just kind of fell in love with the work and the industry. And 20 years later, they're EVP of something.
Right.
And it's not lost on our participants that this isn't just a good first step. If they work hard and they enjoy what they do, there is a pathway for them, for a career within multifamily. I think it's an incredible opportunity that this sector offers to these individuals. Now you gotta earn it. You gotta work hard, but as I mentioned earlier, we're starting to see that happen, which I think is just super exciting.
So one of the things I always say is that in order for any organization to have a great culture, they have to put an emphasis on being good. And by that, I mean being good citizens, being good neighbors, being good stewards of what has been bestowed upon us in terms of what we have and what we create. And I hear people talk about winning all the time, and of course, in sports, winning is easy to quantify. The score dictates who wins. And in business, it's a little bit more gray, but I hear multifamily executives talk about building a winning team, being a winning organization. And one of the things I often say, and again, I've written about this and talk about this, is that I think it's just as important to put an emphasis on how you win as much as it is the actual winning. Winning with character and principles and integrity. And I think, when a management company, I would imagine when they partner with you, they're wanting to demonstrate that they want to be good. They want to do good in this world. So how challenging is it to bring on another management company and really be partnered with them in the right way?
So there are two parts to answering that question. I think in general, when we're talking to senior executives about Entryway and about our program, I would almost say there's pretty much universal, wow, this makes sense. We
Mhm.
need talent. You don't charge for your services. I think this is a good. I think this. Why would we not do this?
Right, right.
Is a very common response, and and it's true because I would say that from a PR standpoint, multifamily sometimes takes it on the chin. I mean, whenever you hear
Sure,
about the family sector, it's going to be around evicting somebody or being against rent control or charging rent that's too high. I mean, those are all negative things. And yet,
sure.
in our work, they're the hero. They're the ones that are mentoring our participants. They're the ones that are interviewing them and that are potentially hiring them and then mentoring them and promoting them. And so this is an opportunity for you know a company in a sector to be seen as the hero versus the villain. Now, our challenge is that as you get closer to the hiring person, a lot of times senior executives will say, "Hey, look, the training's not important. We'll train them how we want them. We can train them on certain things." But the reality is that if you're a maintenance supervisor, you you would really like to have somebody who's done this before and that you would not have to train to do it. And so sometimes therein lies the rub. But again, they're competing against other individuals. Like we don't ask for any special treatment for our participants. They have to win the interview. And so they're competing against other people. And if they're the best candidate, then they get hired. And if they're not, then they got to keep at it. Um, I think the only other challenge sometimes is that we do ask the industry to consider items like waiving the security deposit, waiving the first 30 days of rent, and then having a discount where not more than 30% of their income is spent on rent. Now, here's the thing. If you're looking at maybe a B or a C property and it's a maintenance technician coming in at a higher hourly rate and it's a more affordable property, well, that standard 20% discount, those numbers might just work. But if it's a luxury apartment and you're bringing somebody on in more of a porter position, well, that discount might have to be 40 or 50%. And so sometimes some of the companies will, and it's the ownership side, um, they might balk at that a little bit. So sometimes that's our challenge, and we try to work through it. Those numbers are not hard and fast. If somebody says, "Look, we can't waive the first 30 days," then part of our job is to raise money for the organization, and a lot of times we'll pick that up because we want to get people into jobs and apartments, and we're not going to let a couple $1,000s be what prevents that from happening.
Yeah, because at that point, you haven't solved anything. That
Right.
person is still unemployed or underemployed and still homeless. So so
I, and
th
Bill, let me just mention one thing because you did talk about culture, and I do think that's one of the reasons why uh, organizations want to work with us because it's not lost on them that by being part of the solution around the issue of homelessness, because multifamily is in they create homes
right,
for individuals. So to actually be part of that solution, that's not lost on senior executives to that
sure,
is a that everybody wants to work for a company. Obviously, you want to work for a company that makes money because that's going to you know guarantee your employment. If a company's not making money, that that's going to be a problem. But they also want to work for a company that is a good citizen, that does good things, that they can talk about proudly when they go to holiday parties or family get-togethers or wherever. And so I think it's an important part of a culture of any company to be able to not just make money, and obviously that's a good thing to be profitable and all, but to be able to do good in whatever way they want to be able to do it. That I think is just that's in everybody's best interest, the employer and the employee, and frankly, the residents of these apartment communities. And so, I don't think it's why they do it, but I think it's an added benefit for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you can tell as a consumer, you can tell, you get a sense. You may not know the nuances of the culture of the company you're doing business with, but you can tell. It's so interesting, David, because yesterday my wife and I did something we never do. We don't eat fast food in our home. We just don't eat fast food. I call it poison in a sack. And yesterday we were going to purchase our Christmas tree for our home, and right next door to where we were getting the tree is an In-N-Out burger. And that's fast food. But I said, hey, you want to go to In-N-Out burger? And my wife and my wife really is very health conscious. And she got all excited. And so we did. We went and we sat down and we're enjoying our lunch. And I said to her, boy, you just can't hide culture. You could just tell when you walk in that it's a fast food franchise that has a different culture from the majority of their competitors. The just the care, the friendliness, the engagement, the number of employees back there working, how they engage with one another, you could tell they like each other. There's a camaraderie there. And that culture just stood out to me. And I said to her, if we're going to eat fast food once a year, I want to do it at a place like this. And quite frankly, I don't think the food is anything special. The hamburger was just okay. The French fries were actually very good, but the hamburger was just okay. It's fresh. Everything was fresh. But, I'd rather, if I'm going to eat a hamburger, I'd rather throw one on my grill and grill it at home. But so you talked about some of those challenges. Look, I understand. I was one of your clients years ago. I was the president of a management company. And when I met with your team, and this is back before you were involved with the organization, but when I met with your team, it was obvious to me what needed to happen and why you guys existed and how we could help. And I think there was a little bit of a disconnect between my enthusiasm and the enthusiasm, maybe, down the organizational chain a little bit. And so we had to correct that and internally, have some conversations, make sure that everybody understood why this mattered and what we were trying to accomplish and why. What are some of your challenges? Because I own two companies, a for-profit that pays my bills and a nonprofit that doesn't put a penny in my pocket. And I could speak for hours about my challenges, but we're not here to talk about me. So what are some of your challenges at Entryway?
Sure. Well, and it goes back a little bit to the comment I made earlier about uh, our retention rates are better, but they're not perfect. And so sometimes what happens is when we place somebody and it doesn't work out, um, sometimes some of our companies will come back and say, why don't we take a pause on working with you
Mhm.
guys, which is a little in my and I know I'm biased on this,
It's okay.
but yeah, it feels a little unfair because again, there are people that are not working out all the time that they hire from ZipRecruiter or Indeed or Idealist or wherever they're recruiting individuals, right?
Keep going
But
right back to that same well.
yeah, and so in some cases, it feels like if it doesn't work out, like on the first one, then that's going to cause a problem for us in terms of, and so we know that, and so we try as much as we can that at least those first couple placements are really just solid. But again, you're dealing with human beings, and the last time I checked, anything can happen. I also think, in fairness to our participants, they, they've had a rough, you in all. If you're living out of your car, you're living in a shelter, there are a series of things that have gone badly, either because you've made some bad decisions or some bad things have just happened to you. And so, there's still a bit of a crisis that's going on. A lot of times, figuring out childcare, figuring out transportation. A number of our individuals have to rely on public transportation. Well, public transportation in some of our cities are not that great. And so, to do to have to get to an interview, or in some cases, it's the same situation that you dealt with personally, where that that housing isn't going to come into effect for a 30, 60, or 90-day period of time. And so for that short period of time, they might be on a bus for a few hours a day, getting to and from the shelter
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
their employment. And so anyway, we just have to recognize that there are other issues at play, and everything doesn't just magically go away when somebody gets a full time job and an apartment. But I still think when it works, it's just a spectacular thing to see, because it's helping people in the right way. And again, they have to win the interview. They have to show up. They have to get they have to do the job. There is very much an individual aspect to this. But I think from the company standpoint, for them to be able to do some of those extra things to help an individual, it adds to their culture. Um, Hopefully, it adds a great employee it's not going to be lost on them that they've been given this great opportunity. And I think that also builds a sense of loyalty and stick to itiveness that might not be there for just an individual who just applied and was not necessarily dealing with some of these issues. So when it works, it's a win-win all the way around.
So obviously, for you guys to exist, you have to fundraise.
We do. Yeah.
So how does that work? So if somebody's watching this and they say, "Gosh, I didn't know about this," or "I guess I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention to it, and I don't make the decision at my company, but I'd like to help. I'd like to give some money." How do they do that?
Yeah, so I mean, we do have our website. It's an easy now. The website is entrywaytalent
Okay.
dot org,
Okay.
and so it can certainly be done that way. I mentioned earlier these city advisory boards that exist in the 11 markets that we're in, and again, 99% of the people that are on those boards are in multifamily, but you know we're dealing with an issue that I think is concerning to people even outside of multifamily, the issue of homelessness. And I think people are attracted to the model because of the things that I've mentioned. And so, if anybody would have an interest in serving on one of these city advisory boards, we would love to have that conversation. Number one. Number two, the way that we raise most of our dollars are through special events. And so we have a number of top golf events across the country. Um, Pickleball is become a big thing, and so we have a number of pickleball tournaments. But we also have luncheons and breakfasts and things like that. And so there are sponsorship opportunities, especially if there are individuals watching who have companies that are looking to sponsor events. There's an added benefit of not just making a donation and helping a charity, but it's also getting your name out and getting your name in front of people that you want it in front of. And so a lot of the companies will sponsor a number of these events, and that's another way. Uh, in the last couple of years, we've had two interesting. There's a concept in nonprofit work called cause marketing, and so cause marketing is essentially using a cause to market your product. And so we have a handful of companies that will, if you buy their product, a donation will come to um, Entryway.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so it's one app guarantee. Uh, if a referral is made, well, a $2,500 gift comes to us. Funnel leasing, for every lease, a dollar comes to Entryway. And South Cross Security has a leak detection system. And if you purchase one, $10,000 comes to Entryway. And again, in those situations, everybody wins. So the company's only making that donation when a sale takes place, which is what they're trying to do. And
Right.
anybody that's had to market anything, you spend a lot of money on marketing and you don't really know if that, that commercial or that billboard or that, whatever it is that you purchased, what was the ROI on that? Well, this one is pretty simple. Like, you're not making a gift unless that transaction is completed. So
Mhm.
that's another way in which companies are supporting Entryway.
Yeah, I have with my nonprofit, there's a jewelry maker in Austin, Texas, that for the month of December, every sale, 15% of her sales will then be gifted to our nonprofit.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so, yeah, I'm very familiar with that. But it's interesting because you talked about events. So you may be familiar with Hope and Door. Um, so I actually was the COO of Burger Communities when we launched Hope and Door. So I was very involved in that.
Mhm.
I personally would interview the families that we were looking to help. They just had their big grand giveaway in November, and they brought in, I think their goal was 750,000. They brought in about $800,000.
Wow.
So you're right. Events are big, and they help. And so if any of our folks want to be involved in this, they go to your website. You announce these events on your website. I'm assuming, so they can sign up and participate.
Yeah, absolutely. Or they could just simply reach out to me. Um, My email address is dwilliams@entrywaytalent.org, and I would love to have that conversation. And if it's a local event, we'll connect the individual with our local executive director. So in the 11 markets that we're in, we have 11 city advisory boards. We actually have more than that because, for example, in North Carolina, we have a North Carolina executive director, but we're in Raleigh and we're in Charlotte, and they each have city advisory boards. Same thing with Orlando and Tampa, Charleston and Greenville. And so we would direct them to, if they wanted to do something locally, we could do that. Or if they wanted to do something nationally, then we could figure that out with them.
So you mentioned Raleigh, Charlotte, Charleston, Greenville. What are can you name all the markets you're in for our listeners?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Let's hear it. I'd
So
love to hear this list.
yeah, Nashville,
Okay.
Atlanta, um, let's see, going over Houston, Austin, Dallas Fort Worth, Phoenix, Denver. We just launched in Columbus, Ohio, and so we're excited. So we've been mostly, as you can see, kind of that southeast, southwest, and so I'm excited about our first foray into the Midwest. But even that is something that, we only go into communities where we're invited, and typically it's been either a family or a multifamily company that has said, wow, I really like this concept. I like this idea. I like this way of helping people, and would love for us to have this in our community. And of course, the benefit of that is that it's being done successfully in other cities. And so while it's a startup in that particular city, we have the roadmap. We have the guidebook in order to make it successful. And so, we have 11 executive directors across the country that rely on each other. Um, every community is a little bit different, but at the core, uh, this is one organization. We have one mission, one vision, and one set of values, and we go about our work. Where it's a little bit different is the organizations that we partner with. Uh, I mentioned like Goodwill. In a number of cities, we partner with Goodwill, but in other places, Goodwill does not do the training that would be conducive to multifamily. And so we don't. So in some places we partner with certain organizations, and other places we don't. In some cities we'll have to do our own training because we haven't got the training partners yet. So, but those are, that's inside baseball. Those are details. Essentially, we work in those communities across the country.
I want to encourage people who are either working with you or thinking about working with you to exercise a little bit of patience. As you were talking about, some it doesn't always work out. It's not a guaranteed science. human resources is not a guaranteed science. Everybody has their own mechanism, that kind of dictates how we tick. And I'm a big baseball fan, and I think about who I believe to be the best player in baseball today, Aaron Judge, three-time MVP. He's won the American League MVP the last 2 years in a row. If you were to go back and look at the back of his baseball card when he was called up in 2016, his official rookie year was 2017, but he had a sniff with the Yankees in 2016, and it was pretty bad. I mean, it was actually really bad. His strikeout rate was terrible, and it'd have been easy to say, "Well, this is a failure. It doesn't work." But you know what? Patience is a great thing. They gave him some additional training over the winter, and he came up and made the team in 2017, won Rookie of the Year, and now is a three-time MVP.
Yeah.
So, folks sometimes just need to exercise a little patience. It's not an exact science. I would imagine over the years you guys have have kind of reinvented yourselves in maybe some small increments. What are some of the things that you've done over the last few years to from trial and error to make the program more successful?
Yeah. Well, the first thing we did was we changed our name. Some of your listeners might not be familiar with Entryway because we were Shelters to Shutters, which is a little bit of a mouthful. And so we felt like um, we really needed to have a name that talked about not where people are, but where they're going, that this is an entryway into a new career, a new life, a little bit more forward looking. And so that was
Yeah, I
certainly
like
one.
that.
The other change that I think was really critical is that, in the beginning, we were really a matchmaking or just a placement organization. We really weren't in the training arena. And again, in some of our cities, we partner with schools and people that have workforce development programs. But in other cities, we actually do it ourselves. The main point being is that we have learned that the training piece is critical. And so that was a big change. Alongside that, well, I wouldn't say it's training, it's probably a little bit more mentoring, but the work on interviewing skills, on their resumes, um, kind of that mentoring aspect. We all have mentors in our lives. Either they're formal
Sure.
mentors, informal mentors, but we don't do this stuff by ourselves, and these participants are no different. And so I think we've also learned the importance of that. Even in some cities, we've been doing some peer mentoring, which actually is kind of cool when somebody who has successfully been in our program been able to mentor people coming into it because they're able to say in a way that nobody else can, look, I was in your shoes and
Yeah.
here's what you need to do. And I'm telling you, if you do this, it works. And so that's been, I think, a change as well. Um, and these boards, the creation of these boards have been, in a way, kind of a secret sauce. I talk about the multifamily industry being a $3 trillion industry, but it's also a very small one. And so we've been able to grow because of these executives that have been able to connect us with people that they've done business with for years,
Very good.
and where an individual may not have taken my call or responded to my email because it's somebody that they've known, they'll take that. And again, the only thing we ask for is to be heard. Just but then it's on us to be able to present our our case in a compelling way, and then even more importantly, to be able to execute on anything that we do. And I think that's another piece to this is that we uh, we try to work as simply as possible with the company's own hiring and recruiting practices. And so one of the things that we do when we sign an agreement is to be able to bring all the parties together and say, okay, tell us how are you recruiting regionally or nationally? How how can we make this as easy as possible? Because the truth is if it's not easy, as much as you might love the concept and the CEO is saying, we think this is great, if we don't make it easy on recruiters and HR folks and hiring managers, it's not going to work. And so we're constantly trying to figure out how do we make this easier um, on those individuals because they have hard jobs. They're the number of people that they're trying to bring into the organization that I'm just amazed at the workloads of some of these individuals. So we got to make it easy.
Yeah, listen, I think that's really smart. I first of all, I want to applaud those management companies that partner with you that they care enough to want to make a dent in the homeless crisis in this country because it is a crisis. I think everybody would agree that it's always bad, but it feels especially bad when it's a family, when there are kids who are sleeping in the back seat of a car and aren't getting a warm breakfast, and then of course a lot of these kids, their only real source of nutritional food is when they go to school, and then you've got the summer when they're not going to school. It's a huge problem, and so I want to applaud those management companies that see this and see the impact that you have on really being a solution. Because I don't know that government will ever solve this problem. They certainly talk about it and they certainly allocate a lot of money for it. But I wonder, what the net result is. Obviously, you can look at the net result of what you're doing. And so not only do I applaud your management company partners, but I applaud you and your entire team, your 11 executive directors around the country. Um, and I just thank you for what you're doing. God bless you and your team for everything you're doing. And this, I'm just glad we were able to have this conversation because I think people need to understand the magnitude of this, and but understand the resources that are out there. And you guys are certainly a major resource and doing some great work. So congratulations on your success. But good luck in the nonstop battle that you fight every day in solving this problem.
Well, thank you, and I'll say thank you on behalf of the many many people that are involved in this, either as donors, as industry partners, as board members, as staff. I mean, it's a small group, but it's becoming bigger, and that I think is an exciting part of that. This organization is still relatively new, and yet it's been embraced. And while we're still learning, I think we're getting better and we're getting better known. There are 2 million charities in the United States alone, and so there's there are a lot of people out there doing good work. I mean, that's a good thing. I'm sure there could be some consolidation, but let's just say
Of course.
overall that's a good thing. And I think it's also something that I think as an American we can be very proud of, that aspect of civic life that um,
Uh-huh.
that that in this country people feel empowered to see a problem and do something about it. And that's what happened in this case. This came about from, I mean, our founder is the CEO of a company that develops and manages and owns apartment communities. And he read Chris Finley from Middleburg Communities read an article about the issue of homelessness and essentially said,
Right.
"Well, gosh, why don't you know we could do something about this?" And that's how it started. And it started out of his office and outside of Tyson's Corner. And that's just kind of the power of one. What I would say is the power
Uh-huh.
of what one person can do, and other people can be inspired by that and join in, and all of a sudden it becomes something bigger. I've had the privilege of working with some great organizations where both with the food bank and then Habitat for Humanity and then the Make-A-Wish Foundation and then another organization called Genesis Works, we're at the opportunity to work with founders. And again, it was just a reminder of how something can start very small, and yet if you have the passion to see it through, can become something much much bigger. But you just have to you got kind of have to plug away at it. I'm always my remember the quote that people tend to overestimate what they can get done in a year, but underestimate what they can get done in 5 years. And so I think, I think we're on the cusp of continuing to grow this, and where it goes, 10, 20, 30 years from now, maybe that'll be a day when we're in every state. Um, because again, at its core, this model makes sense. Teaching
Yeah.
individuals how to be self-sustaining is something that is in everybody's best interest. And so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I have a relationship with Tunnel to Towers, and you and I have talked a little bit about them. And I think about Frank Siller, their founder. It started because his brother, Stephen, was a New York City firefighter and lost his life on 9/11, 2001. So, 24 years ago. And I guarantee if you sat down with Frank Siller today and said, "Did you ever see Tunnel to Towers being what it is today?" He'd say, "No, I never imagined in a million years."
Right.
They're building smart homes for critically wounded first responders and military members. Many of them lost their arms, lost their legs, or are in wheelchairs. And he said that the cost of building a smart home, from purchasing the land, all of the permits, all of the fees, the construction costs, the technology, is now approaching $1 million per home. And,
Wow.
I think about that and think, and yet I think this year they just did, I believe 20 homes, in November alone. And,
Wow.
you know, so my point is, Entryway, Tunnel to Towers, Habitat for Humanity, Make-A-Wish Foundation, my little foundation, Hero Trees 214, you know, you never imagine it's going to become what it is.
Right.
But, when people become passionate about your cause and want to be a part of it, that's when, it's like one match lights another match, which lights another match, and then it just goes on and on and on. And the next thing you know, you're a national organization, sometimes international organization, right? Really
Exactly.
making an impact all around the world. So thank you for joining me. This has been a great conversation. It certainly moves my heart. It inspires me to do more, to be better. And, I really thank you guys. So anybody is interested in helping in any way, entrywaytalent.org is your website, or they can reach out to you by email, dwilliams@entrywaytalent.org. And, listen, thank you again for everything you're doing, and thank you for your time. I know you're busy, and we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me on your show, Bill.
Well,
It's
happy
been
holidays to you and your family. And I know you and I will, I suspect, have started a friendship that will last beyond this podcast. And I hope that's true. And I look forward to having many more conversations with you in the future.
That's great. Thank you, Bill. Me too.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you for tuning in. I hope today's conversation left you with a fresh perspective on leadership and culture. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. Want to hear from other industry speakers whose goal is to bring along the next generation of leaders? Then log on to multifamilymedianetwork.com, where you'll meet some of the most innovative voices in the industry.